Hi, it's me, Ted. I'm here to declare my opinions as fact for a video game review, because it's never been done before. Today I'll be reviewing Xenoblade Chronicles X, the spiritual successor to Xenoblade Chronicles. My first impressions before the game's launch had me convinced I was in for a thrilling, nationalism-fueled xenophobic revenge story, in space. However, while the actual game did satisfy that niche craving to an extent, for the most part, Xenoblade X, or simply X for convenience, delivered a beautiful open-world experience rich with life, characters, unique gameplay, and even mechs. So Xenoblade X was produced by Monolith Soft and published on Nintendo. It was directed and written by Tetsuya Takahashi, who was the pioneer of the Xeno series since its cult classic beginnings on the PlayStation. The Xeno series is known for its spiritual successors. The original Xeno game, Xenogears, was succeeded by its spiritual successor trilogy, Xenosaga, which was published by Namco. Then in 2010, Nintendo took up the spiritual successor torch with the release of Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii. Now, like clockwork, we have X, which takes place in its own universe, but throws in a ton of callbacks and references to past Xeno games. X released in Japan in April 2015, but us thirsty Westerners would have to wait until December for it. I am ecstatic to say the wait was well beyond worth it. Here comes the context for the game's story. I won't delve into spoilers because since it's a JRPG, I'd be here all day if I did. So the game starts off in the year 2054. Two alien races, the Ganglion and the Ghost, decide to have a war right above the Earth's atmosphere. Naturally, the Earth explodes in the crossfire. However, the good old US launched a giant spaceship known as the USS White Whale, right before the Earth's destruction. It's essentially a 21st century Noah's Ark, as it holds an archive of humanity's achievements, its art and literature, as well as a couple 100,000 hand-picked people. After 2 years of space travel, the Ganglion tracked down the Ark and caused it to crash land on the nearest planet, which is dubbed Mira. The White Whale breaks up into several pieces from damage, but its blue, tender underbelly detaches itself from the ship and sticks the landing. This underbelly turns out to be a whole city based off Los Angeles, and is aptly named New Los Angeles, or NLA. As the ship exploded, a critical instrument for humankind's continued existence, the Lifehold, also becomes detached and lands somewhere else on the planet. The Lifehold is essentially a giant life-sustaining machine that remotely powers the city, but has a limited charge unless it's reclaimed and connected to the city. The primary goal of this game thus becomes retrieving the Lifehold before the Ganglion gets their reptilian mitts on it, as well as exploring the massive continents of Mira, reclaiming pieces of the White Whale, establishing diplomacy with alien civilizations across the planet, maintaining the peace with NLA citizens, which later extends to assimilate alien life, and of course, going on a totally justified killing spree of any and all Ganglion scum and native Mira life for the sake of experience and protecting the last bastion of humanity. If this is your first encounter with the Xenoblade series, Xenoblade Chronicles X is a good starting point, as none of the games are directly connected and X has the most refined and user-friendly game mechanics. Now, how on earth does this game work? Well, technically it doesn't, because the Earth exploded. Anyway, the gameplay of Xenoblade X takes after Xenoblade Chronicles in terms of gameplay, but with a few enhancements. Your character is a customizable avatar that you create in the beginning of the game, and you and up to 3 other of the playable characters in the game go out and explore the open world. Combat is centered around optimizing your equipment and strategically positioning yourself around the enemy. You run around with a ranged weapon and a melee weapon, and you have a series of skills known as arts, which like most RPGs are stronger than regular attacks and have additional effects like buffs and debuffs. Xenoblade X takes an interesting spin with regular attacks, as they are simply auto attacks, which are timed intervals where your character automatically swings or shoots at the enemy. Your arts go through a state of cooldown after each use and take varying amounts of time to recharge before they can be used again. The animations for the arts are stellar and give off a very satisfying feeling when you land a big optimized hit. That's just the surface of combat. Optimization is your best friend in this game, and a buzzword for this review. Considering the synergy of your arts with your teammates' arts, taking into account the elemental resistances the enemies have, and a plethora of other micromanagement mechanics in the game, give you a lot of reward for using your head. Your allies are CPU controlled, but you can alter their type of attack strategy as well. Also, Xenoblade X incorporates a mechanic known as Soul Voice. How this works is that depending on your specific actions, you'll chance a soul voice activation with your teammate, which can increase your damage output and heal damage received. This can also be customized to fit your playstyle and comes into play a lot during the prolonged fights. The adventure you embark on in this game involves a lot of self-determination. Your character becomes part of an organization named Blade, which has 8 divisions of varying roles, which you can pick and choose from and change at any point in the game. From getting bonuses for killing boss monsters or super enemies, to more bonuses for reclaiming pieces of the white whale, collecting items, or simply getting bonuses from experimenting with different sets of gear and weapons. There's a division and a type of play for everyone. However, no matter what type of style you play, the game urges you, and at some point downright demands you, to explore the open world, and it is massive. There are 5 continents to explore, each with their own weather patterns and enemy types, and the scenery and detail in each area is astounding. I was worried the massive open world would be a bit devoid of activities, but that incredibly wasn't the case. At every square inch, there were items to collect, monsters of varying size to kill indiscriminately, and landmasses to climb and then jump off of. I've been told the scale of the open world is even bigger than that of Skyrim. Now earlier, I mentioned robots. Towards the latter middle part of the game, you receive your very own mech, which is called a Skell, which you can name and color and modify like it's your own artificial child. Exploring with the Skell becomes its own unique experience in comparison to on-foot travel, and larger enemies become much less intimidating when you can bombard their disgusting xenobodies with a massive superpowered sword, scythes, or even an army of drones. Thanks, Obama. Now, in my opinion, these are the strongest points of the game. First off, the gameplay is very innovative for a JRPG, and I could spend hours on customizing alone. Optimization of this game is unlike any other RPG out there, and there is a niche build for every type of player, from debuff artists to all guns blazing types. There's plenty to play around with on unlock and upgrade, and post-game practically doubles your playtime with the amount of near game-breaking gear and weapons and builds that become available to you as you progress through the game. Alongside the customization, there are several playable characters, and each one you can take direct control of and customize to your liking. There's a ton of classes to choose from, and each character, even the plethora of recurring NPCs, possess their own interesting personality and motivations. You can bond with your teammates by using them frequently in combat, or through their own affinity missions, which of course yield more bonuses in combat. Combat in the Skells also feels very powerful and cinematic. There are a lot of sentient alien races to interact with, combat, and compromise with, and each race has their own unique style and personality. For example, there's a race of miniature aliens that are akin to like the love child of Bill Gates and Yoda, and they happen to have an obsession for pizza. There's also the token Space Cats race, which act a lot like Space Shinobi, infused with tiger blood. The amount of side quests in this game are staggering. There are hundreds to take on, and plenty of them feel like their own miniature story missions in their own right. There tend to be a lot of connected side quests that tell an intricate one-off story of their own, and the choices you make during those types of quests can affect the status of New Los Angeles as a whole. Exploration is very satisfying. The visuals are some of the best the Wii U can offer. The activities and environments of each continent give off the impression of a real-time ecosystem, a brilliantly intricate ecosystem of life and materials that you can ravage and harvest to your heart's delight. Uncovering more and more of the land on Mura really instills a sense of accomplishment, like you're completing some form of space manifest destiny. There are a few other notable game mechanics in the game, such as overclocking in combat and frontier nav, which you use to collect money and magic space fuel, but those types of things are better left to the player to discover and experiment with on their own. The struggle is real in this game, but it is a fun one. This game does not hold your hand. It flings you into a whole new world with a gun and a good luck. It's all the better for it, really. It can provide a consistent challenge throughout the campaign for you, and while a few enemy encounters can seem a bit over the top and harsh, especially if you get one-shotted, the game does a good job of staying consistently fair with its difficulty. And besides, if that giant super boss killed you and your whole team with one hit, you were asking for it. Finally, the game has a very eccentric soundtrack. Quite a number of tracks throw up a lot of hype and an assortment of emotions, and this doesn't even account for the boss music in the game. While a few other soundtracks couldn't help but make me just tilt my head and wonder, what? X is definitely the first RPG I've played to have rap music as one of the battle themes, but also one of the very few to have as many memorable tracks while exploring a world in an RPG, especially in the air. Now for some of the game's flaws and criticisms. Some voices and localization dialogue can be a bit hard in the ears, but there's really nothing that'll make you shut the game off at a secondhand shame and cringe reflex. There's also a bit of a debacle over some apparent censorship. There was a feature in the Japanese version that allowed you to modify some characteristics of your avatar, but they were removed in the Western version. Thankfully, the story and the gameplay, they remain wholly intact, and really nothing gets lost in localization, even with the rather infamous Nintendo Treehouse touch. It is a shame, though, that Fire Emblem Fates is upping the ante in the censorship or the adjusting the values department. While I can sing a ton of praises for the game's mechanics, I did notice that for longer fights, skill combat can sometimes feel mindless or a bit spammy. Like, I'll use the same arts and cast a buff here and there, wait for the cooldown for one or the other, use that art again, then repeat till either I or the enemy go down. There is quite a bit of item grinding, especially for developing post-game skills, and without an online guide or a message board, it can get very frustrating to quickly farm for parts. Also, out of 16 playable characters, only like 2 to 3 of those feature different alien races depending on what you unlock. The rest of like the 8 to 10 races in the game are either NPCs or enemies, which is a shame because a lot of those races that are unplayable seem to have a lot of creative potential as playable characters. Some argue that the gameplay is akin to a glorified offline MMO because of the cooldown and the real-time mechanics, but I personally disagree. The combat system is probably a hit or miss with RPG fans, but even if it's a bit of a miss with some players, the other strong areas of the game seem to compensate for it. There was a lot less focus on story than Xenoblade in favor of focusing more on gameplay, and while this definitely still paid off in regards to more meaningful side quests and refined game mechanics, the main story definitely has a somewhat less impactful narrative on the player than what the Xeno games are known for. It has its share of twists, of course, because it's a JRPG after all. But really, the plot is driven by the character interactions, and they really make up most of the substance. But the overall story is a bit less compelling and doesn't have as much exposition than what most fans expected. It's not a bad story by any means, but there are a few holes here and there if you fully digest everything that happens throughout the game. And also, a lot of plot, lore, and exposition get dropped on you in the endgame, and that and a lot of other things you discover aren't really fully fleshed out or aren't given proper closure by the game's end. While I won't spoil, I will admit that the ending to X is a massive sequel bait. And whether it's a good one is up to interpretation, but it's a damn effective one. Because myself and most people that finish the game and are in the grind of post-game are definitely asking ourselves, I need to know now. What's going to happen next? Explain yourselves. Fortunately, Takahashi has gone on record to say that he does take fan criticism into consideration and that his next project will be sure to have a greater focus on story. Hopefully, this future project, direct sequel, can be the best of both worlds. To conclude this review, I say that despite some prevalent and subtle issues, especially the massive sequel bait ending, Xenoblade Chronicles X is a definite must-have for any RPG fan, and uncannily is the new face of superb JRPGs. Very few games can justify an entire console purchase, but the hundreds of hours of content X possesses will leave an excellent aftertaste in your gamer gullet that very, very few anime games can provide. Thanks for watching, and have a grand time exterminating the subhuman alien menace.